The Committee on Homeland Security's Subcommittee on Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection will come to order. Without objection, the chair may recess at any point. The purpose of this hearing is to receive testimony from a panel of expert witnesses on the cybersecurity use cases for artificial intelligence, or AI, and the security of the technology itself following the administration's release of the executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Thank you to our witnesses for being here to talk about a very important topic, securing artificial intelligence, or AI. I'm proud that this subcommittee has completed thorough oversight of CISA's many missions this year, from its federal cybersecurity mission to protecting critical infrastructure from threats. Now, as we head into 2024, it is important that we take a closer look at the emerging threats and technologies that CISA must continue to evolve with, including AI. AI is a hot topic today amongst members of Congress and Americans in every single one of our districts. AI is a broad umbrella term encompassing many different technology use cases, from predictive maintenance alerts in operational technology to large language models like ChatGPT, making building a common understanding of the issue difficult. As the general curiosity in and strategic application of AI across various sectors continues to develop, it is vitally important that the government and industry work together to build security into the very foundation of the technology, regardless of the specific use. The administration's executive order, or EO, is the first step in building that foundation. DHS and CISA are tasked in the EO with 1, ensuring the security of the technology itself, and 2, developing cybersecurity use cases for AI. But the effectiveness of this EO will come down to its implementation. DHS and CISA must work with the recipients of the products they develop, like federal agencies and critical infrastructure owners and operators, to ensure the end results meet their needs. This subcommittee intends to pursue productive oversight over these EO tasks. The timeline laid out in the EO are ambitious, and it is positive to see the CISA's timely release of their roadmap for AI and internationally supported guidelines for secure AI system development. At its core, AI is software, and CISA should look to build AI considerations into its existing efforts rather than creating entirely new ones unique to AI. Identifying all future use cases of AI is nearly impossible, and CISA should ensure that its initiatives are iterative, flexible, and continuous, even after the deadlines in the EO pass, to ensure that the guidance it provides stands the test of time. Today, we have 4 expert witnesses who will help shed the light on the potential risks related to the use of AI in critical infrastructure, including how AI may enable malicious cyber actors' offensive attacks, but also how AI may enable defensive cyber tools for threat detection, prevention, and vulnerability assessments. As we all learn more about improving the security and secure usage of AI from each of these experts today, I'd like to encourage the witnesses to share questions that they might not have yet the answer to. With rapidly evolving technology like AI, we should accept that there may be more questions than answers at this stage. The subcommittee would appreciate any perspectives you might have that could shape our oversight of DHS and CISA as they reach their EO deadlines next year. I look forward to our witness testimony and to developing productive questions for DHS and CISA together here today. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. And as we close out the year, I want to thank the Chairman for what I think has been a pretty productive year on the subcommittee as we've taken on a lot of the challenges in this realm. I also want to offer my condolences to the Chairman of the overall committee for the families impacted by the devastating tornadoes that touched down in Chairman Green's district in Tennessee over the weekend. So my staff and I and the committee staff are keeping Chairman Green and his constituents in our thoughts as we grieve for those that we've lost as they rebuild. Turning to the topic of today's hearing, the potential of artificial intelligence has captivated scientists and mathematicians since the late 1950s. Public interest has grown, of course, from watching Watson beat Ken Jennings at Jeopardy to AlphaGo debating and defeating the world champion Go player in 2015 to the debut of ChatGPT just over a year ago. The developments of AI over the past 5 years have been generating interest and investment and have served as a catalyst to drive public policy that will ensure that the United States remains a global leader in innovation and that AI technology is deployed safely, securely, and responsibly. Over the past year alone, the Biden administration has issued a blueprint for AI rights, a national AI research resource roadmap, a national AI R&D strategic plan, and secured voluntary commitments by the nation's top AI companies to develop AI technology safely and securely. And of course, as the chairman referenced, just over a month ago, the president signed a comprehensive executive order that brings the full resources of the federal government to bear to ensure the United States can fully harness the potential of AI while mitigating the full range of risks that it brings. I was pleased that this executive order directs close collaboration with our allies as we develop policies for the development and use of AI. For its part, CISA is working with its international partners to harmonize guidance for the safe and secure development of AI. 2 weeks ago, CISA and the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre issued joint guidelines for secure AI system development. These guidelines were also signed by the FBI and the NSA, as well as international cybersecurity organizations from Australia, Canada, France, Germany, and Japan, among others. Moving forward, harmonizing AI policies with our partners abroad and across the federal enterprise will be critical to promoting the secure development of AI without stifling innovation or unnecessarily slowing deployment. As we promote advancements in AI, we must remain cognizant that it is a potent dual-use technology. Also, just want to touch a little bit on deepfakes, and I hope the witnesses will as well. They are easier and less expensive to produce, and the quality is better. Deepfakes can also make it easier for our adversaries to masquerade as public figures and either spread misinformation or undermine their credibility. Deepfakes have the potential to move markets, change election outcomes, and affect personal relationships. We must prioritize investing in technologies that will empower the public to identify deepfakes. Watermarking is a good start, but not the only solution. The novelty of AI's new capability has also raised questions about how to secure it. Fortunately, many existing security principles, which have already been socialized, apply to AI. To that end, I was pleased that CISA's recently released AI roadmap didn't seek to reinvent the wheel where it wasn't necessary, and instead integrates AI into existing efforts like Secure by Design and software bill of materials. In addition to promoting the secure development of AI, I'll be interested to learn from the witnesses how CISA can use artificial intelligence to better execute its broad mission set. CISA is using AI-enabled endpoint detection tools to improve federal network security, and the executive order from the president directs CISA to conduct a pilot program that would deploy AI tools to autonomously identify and remediate vulnerabilities on federal networks. AI also has the potential to improve CISA's ability to carry out other aspects of its mission, including analytic capacity. As a final matter, as policymakers, we need to acknowledge that CISA will require the necessary resources and personnel to fully realize the potential of AI while mitigating the threat it poses to national security. I once again urge my colleagues to reject any proposal that would slash CISA's budget in fiscal year 24 as AI continues to expand and will need to embrace and use it to take on the threats in the threat environment. So with that, I look forward to the witnesses' testimony. I thank the chairman for holding the hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Swalwell. Before we get on to the witnesses, I would like, without objection, I would like to allow Mr. Pfluger from Texas and Mr. Higgins from Louisiana to waive on to the subcommittee for this hearing. Okay, so moved. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I am pleased to have 4 witnesses before us today to discuss this very important topic. I ask that our witnesses please raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have all answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please be seated. I would now like to formally introduce our witnesses. First, Ian Swanson is the CEO and founder of Protect AI, a cybersecurity company for AI. Prior to founding Protect AI, Mr. Swanson led Amazon Web Services, Worldwide AI, and a machine learning, or ML, business. He also led strategy for AI and ML products at Oracle. Earlier in his career, he also founded datascience.com and was an executive at American Express, Sprint, and Symmetrics. Debbie Taylor Moore is Vice President and Senior Partner for Cybersecurity Consulting Services at IBM. She's a 20-plus year cybersecurity executive and subject matter expert on emerging technologies in cybersecurity, including AI. Ms. Moore has also led security organizations at Secure Info, Kratos Defense, Verizon Business, and others. Timothy O'Neill is Vice President, Chief Information Security Officer and Product Security, Chief Information Security Officer and Product Security at Hitachi Vantara, a subsidiary of Hitachi at the forefront of the information technology and operational technology convergence across multiple critical infrastructure sectors. Prior to this role, he held leadership roles at Amazon, Hewlett-Packard, and Blue Shield of California. Mr. O'Neill has served as law enforcement officer focused on cyber crime forensics and investigations. Alex Stamos is the Chief Trust Officer at SentinelOne, where he works to improve the security and safety of the internet. Mr. Stamos has also helped companies secure themselves in prior roles at the Krebs Stamos Group, Facebook, and Yahoo. Of note, he also advises NATO's Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, which this subcommittee had the privilege of visiting Estonia in June. Thank you all for being here today. Mr. Swanson, I now recognize you for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement.
Good morning, members of the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection. I want to start by thanking the chairman and ranking member for hosting this important hearing and inviting me to provide testimony. My name is Ian Swanson. I am the CEO of Protect AI. Protect AI is a cybersecurity company for artificial intelligence and machine learning. For many companies and organizations, AI is the vehicle for digital transformation, and machine learning is the powertrain. As such, a secure machine learning model serves as the cornerstone for a safe AI application. Imagine there is a cake right here before us. We don't know how it got here, who delivered it. We don't know the baker. We don't know the ingredients or the recipe. Would you eat a slice of this cake? Likely not. This cake is not just any dessert. It represents the AI systems that are becoming increasingly fundamental to our society and economy. Would you trust AI if you did not know how it was built? If you did not know the practitioner who built it? How would you know it is secure? Based on my experience, millions of machine learning models powering AI are currently operational nationwide, not only facilitating daily activities, but also embedded in mission-critical systems and integrated within our physical and digital infrastructure. Given the importance of these systems to a safe, functioning government, I pose a critical question. If this committee were to request a comprehensive inventory of all machine learning models and AI in use in any enterprise or U.S. government agency detailing the ingredients, the recipe, and the personnel involved, would any witness, business, or agency be able to furnish a complete and satisfactory response? Likely not. Secure AI requires oversight and understanding of an organization's deployments. However, many deployments of AI are highly dispersed and can heavily reliant on widely used open source assets essential to the AI lifecycle. This situation potentially sets the stage for a major security vulnerability akin to the SolarWinds incident, posing a substantial threat to national security and interests. The potential impact of such a breach could be enormous and difficult to quantify. My intention today is not to alarm, but to urge this committee and other federal agencies to acknowledge the pervasive presence of AI in existing U.S. business and government technology environments. It is imperative to not only recognize, but also safeguard and responsibly manage AI ecosystems. To help accomplish this, AI manufacturers and AI consumers alike should be required to see, know, and manage their AI risk. Yes, I believe the government can help set policies to better secure artificial intelligence. Policies will need to be realistic in what can be accomplished, enforceable, and not shut down innovation or limit innovation to just large AI manufacturers. I applaud the work by CISA and support the 3 Secure by Design software principles that serve as their guidance to AI software manufacturers. Manufacturers of AI and machine learning must take ownership for the security of their products and be held responsible, be transparent on security status and risks of their products, and build in technical systems and business processes to ensure security throughout the AI and machine learning development lifecycle, otherwise known as MLSecOps, Machine Learning Security Operations. While Secure by Design and CISA roadmap for artificial intelligence are a good foundation, it can go deeper in providing clear guidance on how to tactically extend the methodology to artificial intelligence. I recommend the following 3 starting actions to this committee and other U.S. government organizations, including CISA, when setting policy for secure AI. Create a machine learning bill of materials standard in partnership with NIST and other U.S. government entities for transparency, traceability, accountability, and AI systems, not just a software bill of materials, a machine learning bill of materials. Invest in protecting the artificial intelligence and machine learning open source software ecosystem. These are the essential ingredients for AI. Continue to enlist feedback and participation from technology startups, not just the large technology incumbents. I and my company, Protect AI, stand ready to help maintain the global advantage in technologies, economics, and innovations that will ensure the continued leadership of the United States in AI for decades to come. We must protect AI commensurate to the value it will deliver. There should be no AI in the government or in any business without proper security of AI. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and the rest of the committee for the opportunity to discuss this critical topic of security of artificial intelligence. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. And just for the record, I probably would have eaten the cake.
You would have eaten.
Ms. Moore, I now recognize you for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Garbarino, Ranking Member Swalwell, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm very honored to be here. In my 20-plus year career in cybersecurity, including working with DHS since its inception, as both a federal contractor as well as a woman-owned small business leader, let me ground my testimony by saying that the potential for AI to bolster cybersecurity for our critical infrastructure is enormous. Second, as IBM, who's been engaged for more than half a century in the AI space, is a leading AI company, let me add that AI is not intrinsically high risk. Like other technologies, its potential for harm is expressed in both how it is used and by whom. Industry needs to hold itself accountable for the technology it ushers into the world, and government has a role to play as well. Together, we can ensure the safe and secure development and deployment of AI in our critical infrastructure, which, as this subcommittee knows well, underpins the economic safety and the physical well-being of the nation. In fact, my clients are already taking measures to do just that. I work with clients to secure key touch points, their data, their models, and their AI pipelines, both legacy and their plans for the future. We help them to better understand, assess, and clearly define the various levels of risk that government and critical infrastructure alike need to manage. For example, through simulated testing, we discovered that there are ways for adversaries to conduct efforts like derailing a train or other disruptive and destructive types of attacks. That knowledge helped us to create preventative measures to stop it from happening in real-world instances, and the same is true for things like compromise of ATM machines and other critical infrastructure. We also conduct simulations or red teaming to mimic how an adversary could or should attack. We can apply these simulations to, for example, popular large language models to discover flaws and exploitable vulnerabilities that could have negative consequences or just produce unreliable results. These exercises are helpful in identifying risks to be addressed before they could manifest into active threats. In short, my clients know that AI, like any technology, could pose risk to our nation's critical infrastructure, depending on how it's developed and deployed, and many are already engaging to assess, mitigate, and manage that risk. So my recommendation for the government is to accelerate existing efforts and broaden awareness and education rather than reinventing the wheel. First, CISA should execute on its roadmap for AI and focus on 3 particular areas. Number 1 would be education and workforce development. CISA should elevate AI training and resources from industry. within its own workforce and critical infrastructure that it supports. As far as the mission, CISA should continue to leverage existing information sharing infrastructure that is sector-based to share AI information such as potential vulnerabilities and best practices. CISA should continue to align efforts domestically and globally with the goal of widespread utilization of tools and automation. And from a governance standpoint, to improve understanding of AI and its risks, CISA needs to know where the AI is enabled and in which applications. This existing AI usage inventory, so to speak, could be leveraged to implement an effective AI governance system. An AI governance system is required to visualize what needs to be protected. And lastly, we recommend that when DHS establishes the AI Safety and Security Advisory Board, it should collaborate directly with those existing AI and security-related boards and councils and rationalize the threat to minimize hype and disinformation. This collective perspective matters. I'll close where I started. Addressing the risks posed by adversaries is not a new phenomenon. Using AI to improve security operations is also not new, but both will require focus. And what we need today is urgency, accountability, and precision in our execution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Mr. O'Neill, I now recognize you for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Garbarino, Ranking Member Swalwell, and members of the subcommittee for inviting me here today. I'm Tim O'Neill, the Chief Information Security Officer and Vice President of Product Security at Hitachi Vantara. Hitachi Vantara is a subsidiary of Hitachi Limited, a global technology firm founded in 1910, whose focus includes helping create a sustainable society via data and technology. We co-create with our customers to leverage information technology, IT, operational technology, OT, and our products and services to drive digital, green, and innovative solutions for their growth. IT is probably familiar to you, but OT encompasses data being generated by equipment, infrastructure, or a control system that can then be used to optimize the operation and for other benefits. Because of our heavy focus on the intersection of IT and OT, one of our major areas of business development and research has been in the industrial AI area. Industrial AI has the potential to significantly enhance the productivity of U.S. manufacturing and create working environments that benefit employees assembling products. Today's AI systems include tools that workers can use to enhance their job performance. Programs are predicting possible outcomes and offering recommendations based on the data being given to them and what the program has been trained to understand as the most likely scenario. That is true of a predictive maintenance solution Hitachi may create for a client to help them more quickly ascertain the likely cause of a breakdown, or in the case of a generative AI system that is predicting what the next sentence could be in a maintenance manual. The U.S. government has taken a number of positive steps over the last 5 years to promote and further the development of AI. We encourage the U.S. to further the development of AI through international engagements and reaffirming the U.S.'s commitment to digital trade standards and policies and digital trade titles and treaties like the ones found in the USMCA. The recent AI Executive Order, EO, speaks frequently to the necessity of securing AI systems. CISA's core mission focuses on cyber threats and cybersecurity, making them the obvious agency to take the lead in implementing this part of the EO. CISA is integral to supporting and providing resources for other agencies on cyber threats and security, as those agencies then focus on their roles in implementing the executive order. This mission is vital to the federal government and where CISA is by far the expert. We applaud the CISA team for their excellent outreach to stakeholders in private industry to understand implications of security threats and help carry out solutions in the marketplace. Their outreach to the stakeholder community is a model for other agencies to follow. As CISA's expertise lies in assessing the cyber threat landscape, they are best positioned to support the AIEO and help further development of AI innovation in the U.S. As CISA continues its mission, we recommend focusing on the following areas to help further the security of AI systems. 1, work across agency to avoid duplicative requirements that must be tested or complied with. 2, focus foremost on the security landscape, being the go-to agency for other federal agencies as they assess cyber-related AI needs. 3, be the agency advising other agencies on how to secure AI or their AI testing environments. 4, recognize the positive benefits AI can bring to the security environment, detecting intrusions, potential vulnerabilities, and/or creating defenses. Hitachi certainly supports CISA's ongoing cybersecurity work. CISA's roadmap for AI has meaningful areas that can help promote the security aspects of AI usage. Avoid duplicating the work of other agencies is important so manufacturers do not have to navigate multiple layers of requirements. Having such a multi-layered approach could create more harm than good and divert from CISA's well-established and much appreciated position as a cybersecurity leader. It could also create impediments for manufacturers, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, from adopting AI systems that would otherwise enhance their workers' experience and productivity, improve factory safety mechanisms, and improve the quality of products for customers. Thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Stamos, I now recognize you for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Swalwell. Really appreciate you holding this hearing and inviting me today. So I'm the Chief Trust Officer of Sentinel-1. I've had the job for about a month. And in that role, I've got 2 responsibilities. So Sentinel-1's a company that uses AI to do defense. We also work with companies directly to help them respond to incidents. And so I get to go out in the field and work with companies that are being breached, help them fix their problems. But then I'm also responsible for protecting our own systems because security companies are constantly under attack these days, especially since the SolarWinds incident. And so what I thought I'd do is, if we're going to talk about the impact of AI and cybersecurity, is just set the stage of where we are in the cybersecurity space and where American companies are right now, so we can have an honest discussion about what AI, the effects might be. And the truth is we're not doing so hot. We're kind of losing. We talk a lot in our field about the really high-end actors, the state actors, the GRU, the FSB, the MSS, the folks that you guys get classified briefings on. And that's incredibly important, right? Just this weekend, we learned more about Volt Typhoon, a Chinese actor breaking into the Texas power grid, a variety of critical infrastructure providers. That is scary and something we need to focus on. But while that very high-end stuff has been happening, something much more subtle has been occurring that's kind of crept up on us, which is the level of adversity faced by kind of your standard mid-sized company, the kind of companies that honestly employ a lot of your constituents, 5,000 employees, 10,000 employees, successful in their field, but not defense contractors or oil and gas or banks or the kinds of people who have traditionally had huge security teams. Those kinds of companies are having an extremely difficult time because of professionalized cybercrime. The quality of the cyber criminals has come up to the level that I used to only see from state actors 4 or 5 years ago, right? So now you will see things out of these groups, the Black Cats, the Alphas, the Lockbits, the kinds of coordinated, specialized capabilities that you used to only see for hackers working for the Ministry of State Security or the Russian SVR. And unfortunately, these companies are not ready to play at that level. Now, the administration has done some things to respond to this. There's, as you all know, there have been sanctions put in place to make paying ransoms to certain actors more difficult. That strategy, I understand why they did it. I'm glad they did it, but it has failed. The current strategy of sanctioning, all it has done is created new compliance and billable hour steps for lawyers before a ransom is paid. It hasn't actually reduced the amount of money that is being paid to ransomware actors, which is something on the order of over $2 billion a year being paid by American companies to these actors. That money then they go reinvest in their offensive capabilities. While this has been happening, the legal environment for these companies has gotten more complicated. You folks in Congress passed a law in 2022 that was supposed to standardize how do you tell the US government that somebody has broken into your network. That law created a requirement for CISA to create rules. Now, it's taking them a while to create those, and I think it would be great if that was accelerated. But in the meantime, while we've been waiting for CISA to create a standardized reporting structure, the SEC has stepped in and created a completely separate mechanism and requirements around public companies that don't take into account any of the equities that are necessary to be thought of in this situation, including having people report within 48 hours, which from my perspective, usually at 48 hours, you're still in a knife fight with these guys. You're trying to get them out of the network. You're trying to figure out exactly what they've done. The fact that you're filing 8Ks in Edgar that says exactly what you know and the bad guys are reading it, not a great idea. Some other steps that's been taken by the SEC and others has really over-legalized the response companies are taking. And so as we talk today, I hope we can talk about the ways the government can support private companies. These companies are victims. They are victims of crime, or they're victims of our geopolitical adversaries attacking American businesses. They are not there to be punished. They should be encouraged. They should have requirements for sure. But when we talk about these laws, we also need to encourage them to work with the government, and the government needs to be there to support them. Where does AI come into this? I actually think I'm very positive about the impact of AI on cybersecurity. Like I said, these normal companies now have to play at the level Lockheed Martin had to 10 years ago, right? When I was the CISO of Facebook, I had an ex-NSA malware engineer. I had threat intel people that could read Chinese, that could read Russian. I had people who had done incident response at hundreds of companies. There is no way an insurance company in one of your districts can go hire those people. But what you can do through AI is we can enable kind of more normal IT folks who don't have to have years of experience fighting the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians. We can enable them to have a much greater capabilities. And that's one of the ways I think AI can be really positive. So as we talk about AI today, I know we're going to talk about the downsides, but I also just want to say there is a positive future here about using AI to help normal companies defend themselves against these really high-end actors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Stamos, and like you, I agree that the SEC rule is terrible, and
Same.
yeah, and hopefully the Senate will fix that this week. We can take it up in January. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of questioning. An additional round of questioning may be called after all the members have been recognized. I now recognize, well, we're not going to go in seniority. I'm going to go with Mr. Luttrell from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. This is definitely a space that we need to be operating in from now to the very extensive future. Mr. Stamos, you brought up a very valid point. It's the lower entities. I had a hospital get hit in my district the day after we had a CISA briefing in the district. My question is, because people show up after the attack happens, we have, and I would say it's inevitably when you peel this onion back, it's the human factor that more or less is the problem set, because we can't keep up with the advances in AI. Every second of every hour of every day, it's advancing. And it seems like because industry is very siloed, AI, ML is very siloed depending on the company you work for, as we try to secure artificial intelligence and we have that human factor, my question is, and this may even sound silly, but again, I don't know what I don't know. Can AI itself secure AI? Is there any way that we can remove as much error as possible and have artificial intelligence work to secure artificial intelligence? Because as the humans, we can't work that fast. Does that question, it all make sense? Mr. Stamos, you start that.
Yes, absolutely, sir. I think it does make sense. I think where we're going to end up is we're moving out of a realm. This stuff is happening so fast where human reaction time is not going to be effective anymore.
Correct, yes.
And it is going to be AI v. AI. And you'll have humans supervising, training, pushing the AI in the right direction on both the defender side and the attacker side.
Is there anything that lives out there right now in the AI ML space that's combating on its, and I dare not say on its own because I don't want to talk about the singularities and scare people out of their clothes,
Yeah.
but are we even remotely close? Because I agree with your other statement you said, we're behind on this one.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of companies, including our own, that use AI in defensive purposes. Most of it right now is you get, one of the precepts of modern defense and large networks is you gather up as much telemetry data, you suck as much data as possible into one place. But the problem is having humans look at that is effectively impossible. And so using AI to look through the billions of events that happen per day inside of a medium-sized enterprise is what is happening right now. The problem is the AI is not super inventive yet. And I think that's where we're looking as defenders to make it more creative and more predictive of where things are going and better at noticing things, weird attacks that have never been seen before, which is still a problem.
And how do we even see something at that speed? I mean, Mr. Swan, we're into exascale computing, if I'm saying that correctly. How does the federal government model and scale this in order to support our industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we need to boil it down, though, to the basics in order to build.
I'm all about that, absolutely, yeah, please.
And I think the simplest things need to be done first. And that is, we need to use and require a machine learning bill of materials, so that record, that ledger, so we have provenance, so we have lineage, so we have understanding of how the AI works.
Is it even possible to enclave that amount of retrospective, prospective data?
It is. It is, and it's necessary.
I believe it's necessary, but I don't even know what that looks like. We have 14 national laboratories with some of the fastest computers on the planet. I don't even think we touch it yet.
And as I said, I think there are millions of models live across the United States. But there definitely is software from my company and others that are able to index these models and create bill of materials. And only then do we have visibility and auditability to these systems, and then you can add security.
How do we share that with Rosie's Flower Shop in Magnolia, Texas?
I think that's a challenge, but we're going to have to work on that.
That's
hand in
something we're
hand
trying to figure
go
out.
down with all of you and say, how do we bring this down to small, medium-sized businesses and not just the large enterprises and the AI incumbents?
I have 30 seconds. I'm sorry I can't get to each and every one of you, but I would really like to see a broken out infrastructure on the viability of threats and the attack mechanism that we can populate or support at our level to get you what you need. Again, we can't see that speed. That is just, and I don't think people can appreciate the amount and just the sheer computational analytics that go into where we are right now, and we are still in our infancy. But if we had the ability to, if you can put it in crayon for me, it's even better. So we can understand and not only speak, and then we understand, but we can speak to other members like, this is why this is important, and this is why we need to move in this direction in order to stay up front of the threats. But thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the ranking member, Mrs. Swalwell from California, for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chairman. And like every witness, I share in the excitement about the potential of AI. And one piece of this that is not discussed enough is equity in AI, in making sure that every school district in my district gives a child the opportunity to learn it. And I think that's one part we have to get right, is to make sure that you don't have kind of two classes of kids, the class that learns AI and the class that doesn't have the resources. That's a separate issue. But on cybersecurity, Mr. Stamos, if you could just talk about what can AI do on the predictive side to help small and medium-sized businesses to kind of see the threats that are coming down the track and stopping them. And is that affordable right now? Is it off the shelf? Like, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I think this is related to Mr. Luttrell's flower shop that he's talking about. If you're a small or medium business, it has never been either cost effective or really honestly possible to protect yourself at the level that you're dealing with by yourself. And so I think the way that we support small or medium businesses is we try to encourage, one, to move them to the cloud as much as possible, effectively collective defense. If your mail system is run by the same company that's running 100,000 other companies, and they have a security team of 400 or 500 people that they can amortize across all of those customers, that's the same thing with AI. And then the second is probably to build more, we're called MSSP, managed security service provider relationships, so that you can go hire somebody whose job it is to watch your network, and that they give you a phone call, and hopefully if everything's worked out and the AI is worked out, you get a call that says, oh, somebody tried to break in, they tried to encrypt your machine, I took care of it.
And what can CISA do to work with the private sector on this?
So I like what CISA has done so far. I mean, I think their initial guidelines are smart. CISA's, like I said before, I think a key thing for CISA to focus on right now is to get the reporting infrastructure up. One of the problems we have as defenders is we don't talk to each other enough, right? The bad guys are actually working together. They hang out on these forums, they trade code, they trade exploits. But when you deal with a breach, you're often in a lawyer-imposed silo, that you're not supposed to talk to anybody and not send any emails and not work together. And I think CISA breaking those silos apart so that companies are working together is a key thing they can do.
Do you see legal risks that are bending companies away from smart, transparent responses?
Yeah, unfortunately, something I put in my written testimony. I once worked in incident response where there were 4 law firms on every single call because different parts of the board were suing each other, and there's a new CEO and an old CEO, and it was a mess. Like you can't do incident response in a situation where it's all overly legalized. And I think part of this comes from the shareholder stuff, is that any company that deals with any security breach, any public company, automatically ends up with derivative lawsuits that they spend years and years defending that don't actually make anything better. And then part of it is the regulatory structure, of the SEC and such, creating rules that now kind of really over-legalize defense.
Do we have the talent pool or the willingness of individuals right now to go into these fields, to work as a chief information security officer?
Yeah, so we actually have a real
Speak to
talent.
that.
Yeah, as a CISO, we have a real talent pool problem on 2 sides. So on, I don't want to say the low end, but the entry level jobs, we are not creating enough people for the SOC jobs, the analyst jobs, the kinds of things that most companies need. And I think that's about investing in community colleges and retraining programs of helping people get these jobs either mid-career or without going and doing a computer science degree, which really isn't required for that work. And then at the high end, Chief Information Security Officer, CISO is the worst C-level job in all of public capitalism.
Why is that?
Sorry, sir. Because it is, you are naturally, when I was a CISO and I would walk in the room, people would mutter under their breath like, oh my God, Stamos is here. And it's partially because you're kind of the Grim Reaper, right? You're only there for negative downside effects for the company. You have no positive impact on the bottom line generally. And so it's already a tough place, but what's also happened is that there's now legal actions against CISOs for mistakes that have been made by the overall enterprise. And this is something else I'm very critical of the SEC about, is that they're going after the CISO of SolarWinds.
Is that a deterrent to people wanting to be a CISO?
Oh, absolutely. I have 2 friends this last month who have turned down CISO jobs because they don't want the personal liability. They don't want to be in a situation where the entire company makes a mistake and then they're the ones facing a prosecution or an SEC investigation. It's become a real problem for CISOs.
Yield back. Thanks.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize my friend from Florida, Mr. Jimenez, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just asked my chat on if there are AI systems right now actively protecting computer systems in the United States and around the world, and said yes. So you do have the rudimentary aspects of AI, because some months ago we were at a conference, or at least a meeting, with a number of technologists, Google, Apple, all those, and I asked them a question: in terms of AI, where are we? And imagine that 21 being an adult, and where are we in that race? And they refused to answer and give me an age. What they did do, though, they said we're in the 3rd inning. So, baseball analogy, it's 9 innings is the full game. So we're 1/3 of the way there, which is kind of scary because of the capabilities right now that I see are pretty scary. So at the end of the day, do you think this could all be elementary? I mean, it appears to me that what we're heading for is cyber attacks are going to be launched by artificial intelligence networks, and they're going to be guarded against by artificial intelligence networks. And that it's who has the smartest artificial intelligence is going to win the race, or is going to win out in that battle or war, et cetera. Would that be accurate? Yeah, anybody?
Yes, sir, that's absolutely accurate.
And so it all, now it means that we have to win the artificial intelligence battle. Or is this just going to be a race that's going to be forever?
Yes, I mean, I think basic American economic competitiveness is absolutely dependent on us maintaining our lead in overall AI technologies, but then especially AI technologies that are focused on cybersecurity.
So where do you see the future? Am I too far off? Is just going to be machines going at each other all the time, testing each other, probing each other, defending against each other, and then somebody will learn a little bit more and get into one system, and then that system learns and combats the next one. But this is just going to be continuous, round the clock cyber warfare.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's the future we're leading to. I mean, it was 7 years ago in 2016, DARPA ran an event which was about teams building computers that hacked each other without human intervention, and that was successful. And so we're 7 years on from that kind of basic research that was happening. I'm very afraid of the constant attacks. The other thing I'm really afraid of is smart AI-enabled malware. That you look at the Stuxnet virus that the U.S. has never admitted to have a part of, but whoever created Stuxnet spent a huge amount of money and time building a virus that could take down the Natanz nuclear plant. And it required a huge amount of human intelligence because it was specifically built for exactly how Natanz network was laid out. My real fear is that we're going to have AI-generated malware that won't need that. That if you drop it inside of an air-gapped network in a critical infrastructure network, it will be able to intelligently figure out, oh, this bug here, and take down the power grid even if you have an air gap.
This is just, conjecture, okay? Could we ever come to the point that we say, what the heck? Nothing is ever going to be safe, and therefore chuck it all and say we're going to go back to paper and we got to silo all our stuff. Nothing can be connected anymore because anything that's connected is vulnerable. All our information is going to be vulnerable, no matter what we do. That eventually somebody will break through, and then we're going to be at risk. Is it possible that in the future we just say, okay, enough? We're going back to the old analog system. Is that a possibility?
I'd like to answer that. I think that in our industry in general, that we have a lot of emphasis on the front end of detection of anomalies and findings and figuring out that we have vulnerabilities and trying to manage threats and attacks. And I think there's less so on resilience. Because bad things are going to happen. But what is the true measure is how we respond to them. And AI does give us an opportunity to work toward how do we reconstitute systems quickly? How do we bounce back from severe or devastating attacks? And with critical infrastructure, that's physical as well as cyber. And so when you look at the solutions that are in the marketplace in general, majority of them are on the front end of that loop. And the back end is where we need to really look toward how we prepare for the onslaught of how creatively attackers might use AI.
Okay, thank you. My time is up, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Carter from Louisiana for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of the witnesses for being here. What an exciting content. And as exciting it is the fear of how bad it can be. What can we learn from the lack of regulation in social media, Facebook and others on the front side that we can do better with AI? Ms. Moore?
Well, I think that there are many lessons to be learned. I think that, first of all, from a seriousness perspective, I think that AI has everyone's attention. Now that it's disintermediated sort of all the middle people, and it's directly in the hands of the end users, and now folks have workforce productivity tools that leverage AI. We have been using AI for years and years. Anybody here who has a Siri or Alexa, you're already in the AI realm. The piece that we have to consider is one of the points that Congressman Swalwell brought up around the idea of education and upskilling and making sure that people have the skills in AI that are necessary to become part of this future era. We work to train folks. We're training over 2 million people over the next 3 years strictly in AI. We've all got to upskill. This is all of us collectively. And I think also a point was brought up about the harmonization piece. I think that this is one area that we can all agree that if we aren't expedient in the way we approach it, that it's going to run right over us.
So let me re-ask that. Thank you very much. But what I really want to know is, we're here, it's here. How can we learn and how can we regulate it better to make sure that what has so much power and so much potential to be good, we thwart the bad part? One example. I recently saw on social media a few weeks ago a message from what looked like, sounded like the President of the United States of America giving a message. Now, to the naked eye, to the individual that's out there that's not paying attention to the wonders of AI, that was the president. How do we manage that? From a security risk, how do we know that this person that's purporting to be Secretary Mayorkas is telling us about a natural disaster or a security breach isn't some foreign actor? Any one of you, in fact, everyone, quickly, we have about 2 minutes. Mr. Stamos?
So on the deepfakes on the kind of for political disinformation, I mean, I think one of the problems now is it is not illegal to use AI to create, there's no liability of creating totally real things that say embarrassing things that are used for political. It is totally legal to use AI in political campaigns and political advertising.
For the moment.
So I would start there. And then work your way down. I think the platforms have a big responsibility here to try to detect, but it turns out detection of this stuff is a technical challenge.
Mr. O'Neill?
I was going to say, if we could focus on the authentication and giving consumers and the public the ability to be able to validate easily the authenticity of what they're seeing, that would be important. And the other thing that was talked about, which I agree with Ms. Moore, about the back end is making sure that we have these resilient systems. What we've learned with social media and cybersecurity in general is it's an arms race. It always has been, it always will be. And we're always going to be defending and, spy versus spy type activities, trying to outdo each other. We need to make sure that we have the back end systems, the data that's available, the ability to recover quickly and get to normal operations back up.
We got about 40 seconds. Thank you very much. Ms. Moore, did you have any more to add? And then I want to get to Mr. Swanson.
I'd just say that there are technologies available today that do look at sort of defending reality, so to speak, but that disinformation and the havoc that it wreaks is an extreme concern, and I think that the industry is evolving.
I think from a manufacturer of AI perspective, we need to learn and we need to understand that AI is different than typical software. It's not just code. It's data. Yes, it's code. It's a very complex machine learning pipeline that requires different tactics, tools, and techniques in order to secure it. We need to understand and we need to learn that it's different in order to secure AI.
And the disadvantage that we have is oftentimes the bad actors are moving as fast, if not faster, than we are. So we stand ready, particularly from this committee standpoint, to work closely with you to identify ways that we can stay ahead of the bad actors and make sure that we're protecting everything from universities to bank accounts to political free speech. There's a real danger. So thank you all for being here. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Okay. Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Ms. Lee for 5 minutes from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, it was widely reported that China launched a massive attack, a cyber attack, against the United States and our infrastructure. This incident is just one single event in a decades-long cyber warfare campaign launched against the United States. We should not expect these threats to lessen and should continue to engage with the proper stakeholders to determine how best to defend our infrastructure. And one of the things that's so important is what each of you has touched on here today, how artificial intelligence is going to empower and equip and enable malicious cyber actors to do potential harm to the United States and our infrastructure. I'd like to start by returning to something you mentioned, Mr. Stamos. I was interested in this point during your testimony with Mr. Jimenez. You described a scenario where artificial intelligence malware could essentially deploy within critical infrastructure on an air-gapped network. Can you share with us a little bit more about how you visualize that threat occurring? How would it get to the air-gapped network in the first place?
Right. So, the example I was using is the most famous example of this is Stuxnet, where the exact mechanism which the jump to air gap has not been totally determined. But one of the theories is that Stuxnet was spread pretty widely among the Iranian population, and somebody made a mistake. They charged a phone, they plugged in their iPod at home, and then that it jumped on the USB device into the network. And so there are constantly, whenever you work with like secure air gap networks, there are constant mistakes that are being made where people hook them up, people bring devices in, stuff like that.
Thank you. And Ms. Moore, I'd like to go back to your point when you talked about the inevitability that there will be incidents, that there will be vulnerabilities, and that one of the things that we can do that's most productive is to focus on resilience, recovery, rebuilding. You've had unique experience working before in federal government on several cybersecurity initiatives. Would you share with us your perspective on how DHS and CISA can best be thinking about those concepts and how we should be measuring success and performance in that way?
That's a very good question. I think that one of the things that we have to move away from in general is measuring based on compliance and the knowledge only of that we have around what we know is a known threat. And so again, the way I said earlier, that we spend a lot of time sort of cataloging all of our concerns. And I think that when you look at industry, and you look at industry globally, and you look at the power of AI, and you consider the way that we manage markets today, the way that we have transactional data moving all over the globe in context, and we have the ability to have that information in front of us in real time, that's the way security needs to be. That's the way threat intelligence needs to be. It needs to be that way across all sectors, but curated for the specific sector. And so it'd be a way of sort of having a common record of knowledge amongst all of the critical infrastructure players and DHS and the FCEBs, and something that we could rely on that would be expedient in helping us to at least stay ahead of the threat.
And as far as the EO itself that directs DHS to develop a pilot project within the federal civilian executive branch systems, is there any specific information that you think would be helpful for DHS and CISA to share with the private sector as they determine lessons learned from the pilot?
For me? Yes, I think that there is extreme importance around what we consider to be iterative learning. In the same way that AI models go out and they train themselves literally train themselves iteratively, we need to do the same thing. So in so many instances throughout global enterprises everywhere, we have lessons learned, but they're not always shared completely, nor do we model these threats in a way that we learn collectively where the gaps are and do that consistently.
And Mr. O'Neill, a question for you. Do you find that generally companies in the private sector are considering the cybersecurity background risk profile of artificial intelligence products when deciding whether to use them? And how can CISA better encourage that type of use of AI that is secure by design?
Thank you for the question. I'm a big fan of CISA, especially with the guidance, the tactical and strategic information they're providing to businesses about threat actors and so forth. In their secure by design, one of the things they call for is doing threat modeling. And when you're designing applications and systems and so forth, if you're doing the threat modeling, you're basically now having to contend with and understand that you're going to be attacked by automated systems or having AI used against you. So I think that helps. Sorry, don't know what that is.
Not to
That
worry.
would be one thing. The other thing I would recommend to CISA would be, they're very focused on giving great information about the type of exploits that attackers are using, and it really helps with defenses and so forth. But again, if they could take some of that leadership focused on resiliency, preparedness, and recovery, so that the companies, once it's a matter of time that you will likely have an event. It's how you are able to respond to that event. And there's many companies, such as the one that I work for, that help companies prepare for the inevitable event to be able to recover and so forth. But having the workaround procedures, especially for critical infrastructure, to get that working and functional so that it can carry out its mission while the recovery occurs, that type of thing, and having your data secured so that it's available and before the attackers got to it, encrypted it, and you can go to a known good copy and stuff is very important. I think they could expand their scope a little more to help companies to be able to really have the workaround procedures and the testing and so forth, just like they do the red team testing to find the vulnerabilities and try to prevent the issues, but also on the backside to recover and learn from the incidents to drive continuous improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Not a problem. We'll just deduct that extra time from Mr. Menendez. I now recognize Mr. Menendez from New Jersey for
I appreciate that, Mr.
3.5 minutes.
And I'd always be happy to yield to my colleague from Florida, who is one of the best members of this subcommittee, and I always appreciate her questions and insight. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, thank you for convening today's hearing. To our witnesses, thank you for being here. I want to talk about one of the fundamental structural issues with AI, how its design can lead to discriminatory outcomes. These types of generative AI that have captured public attention over the last year produce content based on vast quantities of data. Here's the problem. If those vast quantities of data, those inputs, are biased, then the outcome will be biased as well. Here are a few examples. The Washington Post published a story last month about how AI image generators amplify bias in gender and race. When asked to generate a portrait photo of a person in social services, the image generator Stable Diffusion XL issued images exclusively of non-white people. When asked to generate a portrait photo of a person cleaning, all of the images were of women. In October, a study led by Stanford School of Medicine researchers was published in the academic journal Digital Medicine that showed that large language models could cause harm by perpetuating debunked racist medical ideas. These questions are for any of our witnesses. How can developers of AI models prevent these biased outcomes?
First of all, in terms of both from a security standpoint as well as from a bias standpoint, all teams need to be diverse. And let me just say that from a security standpoint, when we're doing things like red teaming and we're going in and assessing vulnerabilities, we need a team of folks that are not just security people. We need folks who are also very deep in terms of subject matter expertise around AI and how people develop models, train models associated with malware that is adaptive maybe in nature, but those teams don't look like our traditional red teaming teams. On the bias front, same thing. The data scientists, developers, and folks that are building the models and determining the intent of the model need to look like everybody else who is impacted by the model. And that's how we move further away from disparate impact, where groups are impacted more than others. Algorithms control who gets in what school, what kind of insurance you have, where you live, if you get a mortgage, all of these things. These are very important things that impact our lives. And so when folks are building models, the intent of the model and the explainability of the model, being able to explain the purpose, where the data came from, and attribute those sources, being able to ensure that that model is ethical. These are all things that security may be able to point out to you the problem, but the tone is at the top of the organization in terms
Yeah,
of
so
making
I want
those
to follow up with you, and then I'll circle back to any of the other witnesses on that first question. But that's the question that we've sort of grappled with on this committee, is one, just the workforce development within the cyber community and what that looks like, and then ensuring, right, especially with AI, as you allude to in your answer, that it's reflective of the larger community. In your opinion, how do we build teams? How do we grow the cyber workforce so it's a diverse group of individuals that can bring these backgrounds into the cyber career?
Well, I think it's commitment. I know that IBM, for instance, has stood up 20 HBCU cybersecurity centers across 11 states. And this is all at no additional cost to the folks who will get this training. I think that AI is not unlike cybersecurity. I think that when we look at the threats associated with AI, it's just an expanding of the attack surface. And so we really need to treat this not as a completely, totally different thing, but employ the tactics that have worked in educating and training people and ensuring that there is not a digital divide in AI and quantum and cybersecurity and all of the emerging technology areas. And I also think that a best practice is to implement these things K through 12.
Yep.
To start when folks are very young, and as they grow and as the technologies evolve, the knowledge can be evolving as well.
Agree with that approach and would love to build that from an earlier age. I have to pivot real quickly. One of the things that I want to focus on is less than a year before the 2024 election. We see the potential for generative AI increasingly likely spreading misinformation with respect to our elections. For any of the witnesses, what specific risk does AI pose to election security?
I think there's too much focus on a specific video or image being created of a presidential candidate. You know, if that happened, every media organization in the world would be looking into whether it's real or not. I think the real danger from AI in 2024 and beyond, and again, you got India, you've got the EU, there's a ton of elections next year. The real problem is it's a huge force multiplier for groups who want to create content. If you look at what the Russians did in 2016, they had to fill a building in St. Petersburg with people who spoke English. You don't have to do that anymore. A couple guys with a graphics card can go create the same amount of content on their own, and that's what really scares me, is that you'll have groups that used to not have the ability to run large professional troll farms to create all this content, the fake photos, the fake profiles, the content that they push, that now a very small group of people can create the content that used to take 20 or 30.
And can be quickly shared, right, through social media. So it's a force multiplier, exactly right. Not just the production, but the sharing quality as well rapidly increases, and then the spread of it, and that's going to be a challenge. I wish I had more time, but the chairman distracted me at the beginning of my line of questioning, so I have to yield back the time that I don't have. Thank
You're
you,
not
sir.
allowed to take time from me, so it's all right. I believe we're going to do a second round because this is so interesting. So, gentleman yields back time that he didn't have. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. Ms. Moore, Mr. O'Neill brought up red teaming in one of his answers before, and I understand CISA is tasked in the executive order with supporting red teaming for generative AI. Do you believe CISA has the expertise and bandwidth necessary to support this? And what would a successful red teaming program look like?
I think that CISA is like everyone else. We're all looking for more expertise that looks like AI expertise in order to be able to change the traditional red team. With the traditional red teaming, the important piece of this is that so you're essentially testing the organization's ability to both detect the threat and also how does the organization respond. And these are real-world simulations. And so once you've established that there are gaps, the hard part is remediation. The hard part is now I need more than the folks that have looked at all of this from a traditional security standpoint, and I need my SMEs from the data scientist, data engineer perspective to be able to help to figure out how to remediate. And when we're talking about remediation, we're back to where we started in terms of this discussion around we have to close the gaps so that they are not penetrated over and over and over again.
So there, I guess there's a concern, if we find the weakness, there might not be the knowledge to fix it?
We have to upskill.
Okay. Mr. O'Neill, another question about the EO. CISA is tasked with developing sector-specific risk assessments in the EO, but I understand there are many commonalities or similar risks across sectors. How can CISA ensure that it develops helpful assessments that highlight the unique risks for each sector? And would it make more sense for CISA to evaluate risk based on use cases rather than sector by sector?
I believe CISA needs to take approach like they've done in other areas, and it's a risk-based approach based on the use case within the sector, because you're going to need like a higher level of confidence for an artificial system that may be used in connection with critical infrastructure and making decisions versus artificial intelligence that would be used to create a recipe or something like that for consumers. But the other thing where CISA could really help, again, is the secure by design in making sure that when you're doing threat modeling, you're not only considering the malicious actors that are out there, but also the inadvertent errors that could occur that would introduce like bias into the artificial intelligence model. Thank you.
So you just said it, they've done this before, so there are existing risk assessment frameworks that CISA has, that CISA can build off of. What would they be? And that's for anybody, if anybody has the answer.
I'll take that one. I think that one that is tremendous is MITRE Atlas. MITRE Atlas has all attacks associated with AI that are actually real-world attacks. And they do a great job of breaking them down according to the framework, everything from reconnaissance and to discovery, and to tying and mapping the activities of the bad actor to their tactics, techniques, and procedures, and giving people sort of a roadmap for how to address these from a mitigation standpoint, how to create countermeasures in these instances. And the great part about it is that it's real world, it's free, it's right there, out there on the web. And I would also say that one other resource that CISA has at its disposal, which is very good, is the AI RMF, the risk management framework, but the playbooks are outstanding. Now there's the risk management framework, but the playbooks literally give folks an opportunity to establish a program that has governance.
Mr. Swanson, CISA's AI roadmap details a plan to stand up a JCDC for AI. You know, this committee's had questions about what CISA does with the current JCDC, and we haven't gotten them all answered, but they want to do this JCDC for AI to help share threat intel related to AI. How do you share information with CISA currently, and what would the best structure for JCDC.ai, what would that look like?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Like my fellow testimonial givers up here, we talked about the sharing of information and education is going to be critical in order for us to stay in front of this battle for securing AI. You asked specifically, how is my company sharing? We actually sit in Chatham House Rules events with MITRE, with NIST, with CISA in the room, and we share techniques that adversaries are using to attack these systems. We share exploits, we share scripts. And I think more of this education is needed, and also amongst the security companies that are up here, so that we can better defend against AI attacks.
Thank you very much. My time is up. I think we're going to start a second round. I will now recognize, I believe, second round we start with Mr. Jimenez for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going back to my apocalyptic view of this whole thing, okay? And I guess I may have been influenced by Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, in those movies, you know, with coming from the future and these machines battling each other. And I think that it's not too far off. I mean, it's not going to be like that, but I'm saying the machines battling each other is going to be constant. So the artificial intelligence battling the artificial intelligence until the one that is dominant will defeat one and penetrate and defeat the system, whether it's the aggressor or the defender. But which to me makes it much more important that we are resilient and that we're not wholly dependent on anything. And instead of becoming more and more dependent on these systems, we become less dependent. Yes, it's nice to have. As long as they're working, they're great, but you have to assume that one day they won't be working. And we have to continue to operate. So where are we in terms of resiliency, of the availability of us to decouple critical systems vital to America? Our electric grid would be one, our piping would be another, et cetera. All those things that are vital to our everyday life. Where is CISA in trying to get companies and the American government to be able to decouple or extract itself from the automated systems and still give us the ability to operate? Because I do believe that every one of those systems eventually will be compromised, eventually will be overcome, eventually will be attacked, and we may find ourselves in really bad shape, especially if it's an overwhelming kind of attack to try to cripple the America. So, anybody want to tackle that one? Because we seem to be looking more and more about how we can defend our systems, and I believe that that's great. But those systems are going to be compromised one day. They're going to be overwhelmed one day. So we have to have a way to not be so dependent on those systems so that we can continue to operate.
Go ahead.
I think that one of the things that with any sort of preparation for the inevitable or preparation for potential disaster or catastrophe, if you will, really is rooted in exercises. I think that from an exercise perspective, we have to look at where we are vulnerable, certainly, but we have to include all the players. And it's not just the systems that get attacked, but also everything from every place within the supply chain, as well as emergency management systems, as well as municipalities and localities. I think that one of the things that CISA does so well is around PSAs, for instance. And I know that this is sort of like a first step in this realm. And what I mean by that is that does the average American know exactly what to do if they go to the ATM and it's failed, or if their cell phone is not working, or if they can't get communications?
No, the cell phone is not working. We're done.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And so we have to have default strategies. And the key piece of that is that these things have to be devised and also communicated so everyone sort of knows what to happen when the unthinkable happens.
Yes, Swanson.
Something to add here, you mentioned AI attacking AI. What is actually being attacked and what is vulnerable? What is vulnerable is the supply chain. It's how AI is being built. It's the ingredients, as I mentioned before in my cake analogy. Most of AI is actually built on open source software. Synopsys did a report that 80% of the components in AI is open source. Open source is at risk. CISA can set guidelines and recommendations and also, with the government's help, bug bounties to actually go in there and secure the supply chain. That's what AI will be attacking.
I'm not so much, I know about the supply chain. I was actually worried about the critical infrastructure itself. Yep. Our grid, our electric grid being knocked out, our energy grid being knocked out. And you're right about foods, the supply chain, et cetera, food and all that being knocked out. And I'm not so sure that we're resilient there. I'm pretty sure that we have relied way too much on automated systems that are going to be very, very vulnerable in the future, and that we haven't focused enough on resiliency of if, in fact, those systems go down that we are heavily reliant on. Do we have a way to operate without those systems?
Mr. Chairman, if you may. Yeah. So I'd like to respond. So your scenario, totally get, and let me play that back. industry.
By the way, the movies were the Terminators. Okay, go ahead.
The industry, energy pipelines. The use, predictive maintenance, and pump seals and valves. The attack, we're going to trick, manipulate models to purposely invalidate alerts and pressures. Impact, physical and mechanical failure. How do we remediate? How do we solve for this? This is where pen testing and red teaming comes in, model robustness. When I talk about the supply chain, it's how these things are built and making sure those are resilient. But I agree with, we got to protect the critical infrastructure, and we need to take records of what machine learning is in what infrastructure and go and stress test those machine learning models.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the ranking member from California, Mr. Swalwell, for her second round questions.
Thank you, Chair. And Ms. Moore, pivoting to the international realm, how important is it that our international partners and allies work with us in setting AI security standards? And what role do you see for CISA and the Department of Homeland Security in supporting this effort?
What I see internationally is that the whole world depends quite a bit on the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. I see that with quantum safe, and I see that also with AI, and that this foundational way of thinking about things offers us a level of interoperability that makes it as global an issue as the way that we function as a global society. I think from the standpoint of the work that's happening today with CISA and DHS, I feel that globally they're very focused on leveraging those tools and the communications aspect of it. We see a lot of duplication around the world of people picking up these best practices and standards. And so I think we need to continue in that direction as much as possible for future. But it's very similar to many other areas that CISA and NIST and DHS work with today.
Thank you. Mr. O'Neill, just as a part of an international company, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, one of CISA's strengths is the way that they go out and they constantly engage with stakeholders, both in the US and international circles. You know, cybersecurity is a team sport, and you know, cybersecurity practitioners within the US and internationally need to work together to be able to face the common threat. I think that's all.
Mr. Stamos, I want to vent a little bit. As a former prosecutor, perhaps there's no crime today that exists that has less of a deterrent in its punishment than cybercrimes. It's really frustrating to see whether it's an individual who's the victim, whether it's, as you said, any size company or our country. It's frustrating because you can't punish these guys. It seems like they're just untouchable. And wanted you to maybe talk a little bit about, like, recognizing that if these attacks are coming from Russia or China or other Eastern European countries, many of them are not going to recognize a red notice. So we could work up a case and send a red notice to Moscow. Like they're not going to go grab these guys. Do you see any deterrent that's out there? Is there a way to punish these guys? Does AI help us? And I know we have our own limitations on going offensive for private companies, but should we re-examine that? How do you impose a cost on these actors who are just savage in the way that they take down our individuals and companies?
Yeah, I mean, it is extremely frustrating to work with companies and to watch these guys not just demand money, but text family members of employees and do ACH transfers from small vendors just to intimidate them. And to laugh about it effectively. I mean, I think there's a bunch of things we could do. One, I do think like the FBI workups and the red notices do have a deterrent effect. You know, Russians love to go visit their money in Cyprus, right? Especially in the winter. And so locking people, 22-year-olds that can never travel for the rest of their lives, I think actually is a positive thing. Like, enjoy Kazakhstan, right? And so I do think that's good. I would like to see, obviously, I don't see what happens on the classified side. It felt like after Colonial Pipeline that there was an offensive operations by Cyber Command against a lot of work to try to deter these guys and to disrupt their operations, and that has perhaps slackened off. And so I would like to see the United States, I don't think private companies should do it, but I do think the US offensive capability should be used against them. And then I think it's seriously time for Congress to consider outlawing ransomware payments.
And can we just briefly talk about that? Because you and I have talked about this for a long time, and I do think in a perfect world that stops it. But what do you do in the gap between the day you outlaw them and then the weeks after, where they're going to test to see if they're paid, and you could see just a crippling of critical infrastructure?
I mean, if you outlawed ransomware payments, there would be 6 months of carnage as they tried to punish the United States and to reverse it. I think a couple things have to happen here. One, I think that this is something that Congress should do, not the administration unilaterally, because I think it needs to be a unified political stand of both political parties says we're not doing this anymore. We are not sending billions of dollars a year to our adversaries to hack us. And so it doesn't become a political football. If the admin did it by themselves, I think it would be much easier to blackmail them into undoing it, right? Congress needs to speak as one voice here. Second, I think Congress would need to set up, delay the implementation and especially focus on nonprofits and local and state municipalities. You could be buying them insurance policies. There's been a lot of interesting work around state national guards, state guards of direct commissions. I know like CISOs my age getting direct commissions so that if something bad happens to a state or locality, they have the legal authority to go work with them. I do think, though, it's the time to do that because the current status quo is not working.
Great. I yield back, but again, Chairman, I think this has been one of our most productive hearings this year, and thank you and the witnesses for making it so constructive.
Thank you. Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Zell from Mississippi for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today and sharing with us because we are way behind and we recognize that. So the capabilities of AI are advancing very rapidly as we've talked about today. It's just kind of like when you buy a phone, it's outdated, they want to sell you another one. I have some concern about government oversight and overregulation that I'd like to talk about a little bit. I spent most of my career as a law enforcement officer and a sheriff. And I've seen directly how government red tape can get in the way of law enforcement. And if American industry is smothered by regulation and reporting requirements, our adversaries are, they're going to develop new AI capabilities before we do. And we cannot let this happen. I have concerns that the Biden administration's executive order on AI grants 4 departments and countless agencies jurisdiction over AI. Specifically under this committee's jurisdiction, DHS is tasked with establishing guidelines and best practices around AI. As always, when regulating an industry, especially when the government's involved, the language must be clear in its intent so that we can get it right. Mrs. Moore, how could a lack of coordination between federal agencies and the private industry, especially while establishing guidelines, hamper innovation in AI?
I think it's most important that we focus on not hampering innovation, for starters. And by that, what I mean is that we have, these open source systems that people who are in medium and small businesses or technology groups or research and development groups have an opportunity to innovate and help bring us further along than what we are today from a cybersecurity standpoint, from an AI standpoint. And we can't stifle that innovation. A lot of the greatest ideas come out of those entities. But also, we have to guard against the idea of AI as a technology. This is such an inflection point. It's too important a technology to be just in the hands of a small group of large organizations, let's say. And so I think that there is a balance that needs to be struck, that we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, but that we need thoughtful leadership around achieving AI that's not predatory, achieving AI that's open, achieving AI that is like when you go to restaurant and you get to see the kitchen and how the people are cooking your food and whether there's cleanliness and there's good best practices there. AI needs to be open as well in that way.
That's why we need to try to keep the government out of it as much as possible. Ms. Moore, in your opinion, should DHS and CISA have a role in the regulation of AI?
I think that DHS and CISA have a lot of inputs and a lot of important learnings that need to be incorporated in any sort of discussion around regulation. I also think that really with AI, we have to look at the use cases. We really have to examine that, and everything needs to be, we need to offer a standard of care that allows us to not be draconian. This is an evolving space, and so we want to make sure that the folks who are closest to it, our experts, are also engaging and providing inputs.
Thank you very much. You know, I was listening to Representative Swalwell talk about the lack of prosecution, lack of anything getting done, and going back to my small hometown, one of our local churches got hacked and locked everything down, and the preacher had to use his own credit card to pay $500 to get him to turn that thing loose. Our hospital system was hacked, and it's just, you know, it goes on, and it seems like there's just no recourse. It's almost like credit card fraud sometimes, and as a law enforcement officer, I've seen so many victims out here, and there's hardly anything that can be done about it. Would any of you like to expand on that just a little bit?
If I may, sir, I think you're totally right. I think one of our problems is we have the serious gap in law enforcement between local and the FBI. If you're a big company, you can call an FBI agent, you can get 3 or 4 of them on the phone with you, they will be as supportive as possible. If you're Mr. Luttrell's flower shop or the church in your district, they're not gonna get an FBI agent on the phone. And if they call the local police, generally those folks are not prepared to help with international cybercrime.
Yeah, we're not.
And so I do think there's a gap here that Congress should consider of how to fill. A good example where this has been positive is in what called the ICACs, which is the child safety world, which I've done a bunch of work in, where the creation of local folks who are then trained and supported by federal agencies to do child safety work. And in the end, it's local sheriff's deputies and local detectives, but they can call upon investigative resources from the Secret Service, from the FBI, from HSI. And I think something like that around cybercrime of investing in the local capabilities would be a good idea.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Ezell. Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Carter from Louisiana for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Moore, you mentioned in your earlier comment about IBM and the efforts that you have with HBCUs. Can you expound on that, as we know that HBCUs have been the target of many cyber attacks?
Yes, indeed. So we developed a program where rolling out these skill sets or these CLCs, they're cyber leadership centers, in HBCUs around the country. So there are roughly in 11 different states, but 20 of them. And working with the faculty and working with a liaison within the HBCU to develop and to share curricula that we've established that is very professional grade in terms of our own expertise that we bring to it. But we recognize that there's a tremendous amount of talent everywhere, and that we really have to pursue, with the skills gap that we see in cybersecurity, it's kind of as someone mentioned on the panel here, a team sport, and we need all hands on deck. And we also need to ensure that communities are not left behind, that everyone has an equal opportunity to be able to learn the skill sets and have the credentials necessary to work in this important field.
So you mentioned 10 states or 10 institutions. I don't know if it's 10 states or 10 institutions, but whatever the case, for HBCUs that are out there that are in need of the services that you indicated, is there more bandwidth to include additional ones? Is there any directions you can give me? I represent Louisiana with a rich group of HBCUs and would love to have IBM partner or look at opportunities to be a part of that? Any direction you can give?
Well, it's 20 centers across 11 states, and we'd be happy to talk to you about what you would like to see happen there in Louisiana.
Fantastic, thank you. Mr. O'Neill, with the emergence of AI, are you concerned about what this means for academia, for students using ChatGPT or others for term papers or research, or the validity of students following an exercise or an assignment without cheating, if you will, through AI?
Yeah, I'm concerned about that, but it also enables students also to be more empowered with more information and maybe to even be more effective in what they're learning and so forth. So they're going to have to learn different in a world with AI. Like they're going to have to learn to use or write prompts to get the information out of AI, and they're going to have to learn to look at the sources that are cited in the output from the AI to validate that they're not receiving a hallucination, hard word for me to say, and so forth. So
what about the student that asks a direct question to ChatGPT and insert the answer based exactly on what was asked? What about, how do we determine the validity of that? How do we make sure that students are not misusing? While we understand that it's a great tool for research, and anybody can chime in. Ms. Moore or Mr. Stamos, look like you guys are
I would just
interested.
say it's like a mini arms race, because you have the students that want to use it, some of them for nefarious purposes, but then you have the counter programs that academia is using to identify when it's being used and so forth. So right now, I was just reading in the news about this where, the AI to detect the use of AI.
We've got about 55 seconds. Do you mind sharing the mic, Mr. Stamos and Ms. Moore?
Yes, I mean, I teach 2 classes at Stanford, and this is a huge discussion among the faculty, is how do you give an essay in the modern world? I mean, I think one of the great things about AI is it is going to even out the playing field in that people who have lacks of, business email skills, perfect English and such, the AI will be a huge help, but you don't want to give kids that crutch as they get there. And this is gonna become much harder over the next couple of years because AI is being turned on in default, so students won't have to go actively cheat. They will get in trouble for not going and turning off things that are turned on by default in Google Docs or in Microsoft Word and such. And so I think it's a huge problem for both higher and lower education.
Ms. Moore?
I would just say that the space is evolving and that there are many tools that are out there to detect this in papers and research work and that sort of a thing. But you have to remember that generative AI looks and scans all of the work that's out there, and a lot of people have a lot of work out there. And so being able to defend against that and also being able to make sure that there is critical thinking happening in universities and critical thinking happening still for students, even though they have this magnificent tool. I recently had a friend whose daughter had to appeal the university because she was accused of that, of having used a generative large language model. And in reality, she was very prolific on the internet, and it was picking up her own work. So we have a ways to go with these technologies.
Thank you. My time is evolved. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Ms. Lee from Florida for a second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Swanson, I'd like to return to something you said a little while back, which was a comment that 80% of open source software is at risk. I know you touched on this as well in your written testimony and specifically encouraged this committee and Congress to support certain measures, including bug bounty programs in foundational artificial intelligence models that are being integrated into Department of Defense missions and operations. Would you share for us a little bit more about how bug bounty programs specifically could help in that kind of program and any other specific things you think Congress should be looking at or considering in helping protect our infrastructure and critical systems as it relates to AI?
Thank you for the question. Appreciate it. My statement was 80% of the components, the ingredients used to make AI, come from open source. As such, protecting open source is really important. So what is a bug bounty program? A bug bounty program basically gets to a threat research community and focuses them to find vulnerabilities. And in this case, find vulnerabilities in machine learning open source software. I'll give an example. Through this research, through a bug bounty program, we were able to find a critical vulnerability in what's called a model registry. What is a model registry? It's where we host machine learning models that power AI. What was the exploit? A malicious actor can get access to the model registry to modify the code, steal the model, or perhaps traverse it to get to other sensitive areas of critical infrastructure. NIST and MITRE gave this a critical vulnerability score. Now, a lot of research hasn't been done in open source software as it relates to machine learning and bug bounty programs. It's an area, if you look at all of the big security incumbents, it's not where they focus. But yet, it's the massive amount of ingredients that's used in AI and machine learning. So what I was asking Congress was for focus to be able to say, hey, let's protect the ingredients. As I shared with Mr. Jimenez, it's not AI attacking AI in the models. It's going to be attacking the supply chain of how these things are built. And bug bounties will help find vulnerabilities and remediations to fix those ingredients.
Thank you. Mr. Stamos, I'd like to have you elaborate a bit. Earlier, we were talking about the concept of Congress potentially outlawing ransomware payments, and you indicated you anticipated that if Congress were to do so, it would be followed with 6 months of carnage. Would you tell us a little bit more about what you anticipate that 6 months of carnage would look like, and what could we be doing to help mitigate that vision?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe I'm being a little too colorful here, but I do think these are professionals. They are used to making tens of millions of dollars a year. They are somewhat rational actors. And so eventually, I think that they will have to adapt their economic model. But in the short run, being cut off, that they would do everything they can to try to convince the United States that this policy was not appropriate. And so I think the things you could do, one, no exceptions. I've heard people talk about bug bounty limits, and then you say, oh, well, except hospitals or something like that. If you have an exception, then that's all they'll do, right? If there's exceptions for hospital, all they're gonna hack is hospitals, right? And so it's terrible, but we'd have to live through the president getting up there and saying, we're not negotiating with terrorists, we are not paying this bounty, it's terrible for the people who live in this place, we're gonna give them as much support as possible. Second, I do think that there is a role to play, especially like I said, the locals and states are in real trouble here. And so preemptive grants for them to upgrade their architectures. When we usually see these bug bounty, or I'm sorry, these ransomware actors are really good at breaking the networks that are built the way Microsoft told you to build them in 2016, right? That's kind of a very traditional, not to get too technical, but Active Directory, SCCM, like a very traditional Windows network that the bad guys love that. And that's how your local states, your counties and such. And so an aggressive move to try to get them onto more modern technology stacks is something you could do in that run up. And then I think the third is, like Mr. Swalwell was talking about, trying to impose costs on the bad guys. That in that active time in which they are trying to deter the government from standing strong, that you're also actively going after them, you're doxing them, you have the FBI indicting them, you have Cyber Command, destroying their command and control networks and such. And eventually they would have to change their business models to match. That wouldn't make the world, that wouldn't all of a sudden America be totally secure, but it would get rid of this cycle of these guys being able to get better and better, both by practicing their craft all day and also collecting all this money and building these huge networks.
Thank you, Mr. Stamos. Mr. Chairman, I yield back on time.
Yields back on time. Actually, 1 second. We'll give that to Mr. Menendez. Mr. Menendez, I now recognize you for 5 minutes for second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to return back to the risk that AI poses to election security. I appreciate Mr. Stamos' answer. I just want to quickly open up to any of the other witnesses if they'd like to expand on it. Okay, so let me ask a question. How can CISA best support election officials in combating the risk? Mr. Stamos, I'll go back to you.
So not just about AI, but the kind of coalition that came together to protect the 2018, 2020, 2022 elections has fallen apart. And I think Congress has a role to play here. This is due to investigations elsewhere in the House, into civil lawsuits. There's a lot of arguments over what is the appropriate role of government here. And there are totally legitimate arguments here, right? There are totally legitimate arguments that there are things that the government should not do, especially when we talk about mis and disinformation. Instead of this being a 5-year fight in the courts, I think Congress needs to act and say, these are things that the government is not allowed to say, this is what the administration cannot do with social media companies, but if the FBI knows that this IP address is being used by the Iranians to create fake accounts, they can contact Facebook, right? And that, recreating that pipeline of Cyber Command and NSA to the FBI who can help social media companies stop foreign interference, recreating that I think is a super critical thing, and only Congress has the ability to do that.
Got it. And just looking through the election system, how can we support our local election officials who face some of the same challenges small businesses do in terms of fewer resources, but having the same challenge arrive at their doorstep?
Yeah, I mean, so traditionally this has been the role of the election infrastructure ISAC and the multi-state ISACs, in that, unlike any other developed economy, we have 10,000 election officials who run our elections, and that does provide security benefits in that it would be extremely hard to steal the entire election because you have so many disparate systems, so many different ways of counting and such. But it also makes it much easier to cause chaos. So I think reaffirming CISA's role as a supporter here and reaffirming the role of the ISACs as providing that level of support is a key thing, because that's, again, something that's kind of fallen apart since 2020.
Are there any other considerations that we in Congress should be thinking about as we go into 2024 with respect to election integrity?
I mean, I guess there's a bunch. I think the other thing that a number of people have proposed, a colleague of mine, Matt Masterson, came and wrote a report with us at Stanford on the things he would do. And so I'm happy to send you a link to that. But there's been discussion of creating standards around, what audits look like, what does transparency look like and such. I think it would be nice to see the states with a push from the federal government to more aggressively mentally red team their processes to see how does it look to people. That if you have rules that you're counting, it takes you 2 weeks here. In California, it takes us forever to count our ballots because of a bunch of different rules. And that makes people think the election's being stolen. It's not being stolen, but it's not fair, but you should set your policies with the expectation that people will take advantage of those kinds of situations to say the election is being stolen. And so I think doing a better job of setting up our rules to be very transparent, to make it clear to people this is how an audit works, is one of the things that we've got to think about going into 2024, so that when you have these things that seem a little weird, it does not create an opportunity for bad actors to try to imply that the entire election was rigged.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself for the last 5 minutes of questions. I'll start with Mr. Swanson. The EO directs DHS to establish an artificial intelligence safety and security board. How can the secretary best scope the composition and mission of the board, and what kind of perspectives do you think the DHS should ensure are represented?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think for the composition of the board, it needs to be a board that technically understands that artificial intelligence is different than your typical software. That's first and foremost. The second part is the actions of that board is we need to take an inventory. We need to understand where all of our machine learning models are, the lineage, the provenance, how they're built, and only then do we have the visibility, the auditability to actually secure these.
Mr. Stamos, quick question for you. I lied, I'm not going to be the last person to speak. CISA's information sharing mission is crucial. Do you think CISA has the tools it needs to be able to notify entities of potential AI threats? Is CISA's ability to issue administrative subpoenas sufficient?
So the administrative subpoena thing, my understanding, is mostly used for if you find vulnerabilities and you can't assign them to a specific, here's an open port and we think it's a dam, but we're not sure exactly who it is, that you can find out who that is. What I would like to see is, I think it would be great to follow on what Congress did of centralizing cyber incident reporting to some equivalent around AI incidents that, effectively blame-free, regulatory-free, that, you have a free. I'd like to see a model more of what happens with aviation, where if there's a near miss, you can report that to a system that NASA runs, and nobody's going to sue you, nobody's going to take your license away. That information is used to inform the aviation safety system. I'd love to say the same thing out of AI. I don't think CISA has that capability right now.
So subpoenas are useful, but something like CIRCIA would be, like we did with the.
I just feel like the subpoenas are for a very specific thing. The key thing we need is we need defenders to work together. And right now, the lawyers don't let them. And so finding out what those barriers are that make the lawyers give that advice and taking those barriers down, I think is a good idea.
Mr. O'Neill, I'm concerned about the use of AI further exacerbating the risk associated with the interdependencies across critical infrastructure sectors. Does your sector understand the risk associated with these interdependencies and AI? What are you doing to mitigate that risk, and is there more that CISA can do to help?
Thank you for the question. Working for Hitachi, we work in multiple sectors. So we have a company focused on energy, company focused on rail. The subsidiary I'm in is focused on critical infrastructure like data storage and stuff, helping companies be more resilient and so forth. What we're doing as a company is we're getting the people from all of the sectors together, and along with our cybersecurity experts, and we're going through the use cases ourselves in the absence of regulations to look and do threat modeling and so forth, and look at the use cases so that we can help these critical sectors be more effective in protecting what they do. And what was said earlier in regards to, a mass event where the technology is unavailable and the critical sectors thus are unable to function. The thing that I think CISA could do, again, is helping bring some business acumen at looking at the problem of how to recover and what the mission is, and being able to deliver the mission of the critical infrastructure, maybe in the absence of the technology being available. When I worked at a health insurance company, one of the things we did is we approved people to get medical procedures, in an emergency. So we went through scenario training that said if that technology fails, we're going to fail open and we're going to approve all the requests come in and we'll sort it out later. So no one would be denied care. That would be an example. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. And lastly, Mr. Swanson, how do you expect malicious actors will leverage AI to carry out cyber attacks? Do you think the efforts to use AI for cyber defense, and do you think the efforts to use AI for cyber defense will progress faster than efforts to use AI for offensive cyber operations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always think it's going to be a give and take here. It's going to be hard to stay one step in front of the attackers. What I will say is, as long as we understand the foundation of how these things are built and protect that foundation, then we're going to be less at risk for these attacks. That's where the focus needs to be.
Thank you very much. My time is up. I now recognize Ms. Jackson Lee from Texas for 5 minutes of questions.
I thank you for yielding, and let me thank Ranking Member Well for a very important hearing. I'm probably going to take a lot of time reading the transcript, having been delayed in my district, but I wanted to come in the room, first of all, to express my appreciation that this hearing is being held, because I've been in discussions in my district where I've heard, and media commentary, that Congress has no interest in regulating or understanding AI. I want to go on record for saying that we as members of Congress have been engaged in task force. I'm a member of the task force led by a bipartisan group of members. I know that the ranking member and others, we have been discussing the cruciality of AI and how we play a role. It is not always good for Congress to say, me, I'm here to regulate, and not ensure that we have the right roadmap to go forward. So, Ms. Stamos, if I have asked you questions that have been asked and answered, forgive me, I'd like to hear them again. And in particular, let me start off by saying you mentioned in the last page of your testimony that it is important for policymakers to adopt nimble policies. This is something that I am very wedded to. I don't know if I'm right, but I'm very wedded to, because AI is fluid. It is something today, it was something yesterday, and it'll be something tomorrow and then the day after. But NIMA policies and safeguards in collaboration with the private sector, how would you recommend we implement that? And in that, would you please use the word, should Congress, is there a space, a place for Congress to jump in and regulate? Again, this is a fluid technology that is moving faster than light, I would imagine. But let me yield to you.
Yes, Congressman. I mean, I think you made a very good point about the being flexible here. My suggestion on AI regulation is to do it as close to the people it's impacting as possible. So the people you can learn from what not to do here would be Europe, right? So the Europeans, in that the European Parliament believes that effectively every problem can be solved by regulating the right 5 American companies, right? And the truth is with AI is, while it feels like 5 or 6 companies are dominating it, the truth is that the capabilities are actually much more spread out than you might tell from the press because of open source, like Mr. Swanson's been talking about, and just because of the fact that my Stanford students build generative AI models as upper division class projects now. That is just something they do in the spring to get a grade. And so what I would be thinking about is—
These are students who have not yet become experts.
Right. But I'm saying, like, they go out into the workplace and they go necessarily work for an OpenAI or a Microsoft or a Google. They can go work for an insurance company, and the way that they will be building software for State Farm in the future is going to be based upon the basic skills that they've learned now, which includes a huge amount about AI. And so my suggestion is regulate the industries that have effect on people about the effects. The fact that it's AI or not, if an insurance company makes a discriminatory decision about somebody, it is the discriminatory decision that should be punished, not the fact that there's some model buried in it. And I think it's not going to be effective to try to go upstream to the fundamental models and foresee every possible use. But if it's misused in medical purposes, if a car kills somebody, if a plane crashes, we already have regulatory structures to focus on the actual effect on humans, not on the fact that AI was involved.
So how would you reach AI? What would be Congress's reach to AI, where Congress could say, on behalf of the American people, we have our hands around this?
So where you could in those cases is, I think one of the things that's very confusing to people is, where does liability accrue when something bad happens? Is it only at the end, or is there some liability upstream? So I think clarifying that is important. And I do think, like the EO said, having your hands around some of the really high-end models to make sure that they're still being developed in the United States, that there's appropriate protections about that intellectual property being protected. I think that's important. But there's not a magical regulation you can pass at the top of the AI tree that's going to affect all of the possible bad things that happen at the bottom.
Ms. Moore, let me quickly get to you about the deep state, or the utilization of AI in gross misrepresentation, being someone else, fraudulently such and dangerously such, that impacts individual lives but also national security.
I think that as Congress looks at AI in general, and the fact of the matter being that AI has been in place for a very long time already, I think that the AI Human Bill of Rights that sort of outlines some of those areas where we've not necessarily given due care to individuals in terms of their ability to move within the world without all of the quote-unquote algorithms making all the decisions about them. I think that fair and trustworthiness is critically important, and that industry has to regulate itself, in that it really needs to explain how its models make decisions. I believe that the ability to prove that your AI and your model is not predatory is an important part of trustworthy AI. And I think you have to start, as Alex said, where the individual's most impacted. And there are a number of use cases. There have been tons of groups convened for the purpose of collecting this sort of data, and it shows up in that AI Bill of Rights. I think it's a good starting place to think about disparate impact. But it is it's not that the algorithms need to be regulated, it's the use cases.
So it's if you have a pipeline, it's not at the top, it's down at the ultimate impact. Let me thank I have many more questions, but let me thank you for this hearing and thank both the chairman and the ranking member. With that, I yield back and I'll dig in even more. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Mr. O'Neill. We don't know what that buzzing means either. I want to thank you all for the valuable testimony, and I want to thank the members for their great questions. This has been the longest hearing that we've had this year, and it's because of your expertise on the panel to the witnesses. So thank you all for being here. And before we end, I just want to take a point of personal privilege to thank Kara Mumford on my team here. This is her last hearing as a member of the committee. She is, I don't think it's greener pastures, but she's moving on to a much nicer position, and we will miss her dearly. This committee would not have been as successful this year without her, and I would not look like I would know what I'm doing without her. So, if we could all give her a round of applause. All right. So the members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we would ask the witnesses to respond to those in writing. Pursuant to the Committee Rule 7D, the hearing record will be held open for 10 days. Without objection, this subcommittee stands adjourned.